Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
The pseudo-god flew past countless worlds and galaxies, almost at the speed of light. Daniel didn't care where he ended up as long as the monster behind him wouldn't catch up to him. Finally, in the distance, he saw a blue planet, a world that he knew very well. A place where there was no magic and where only technology reigned supreme. But when he was only thousands of miles away from Earth, he saw a half-elf holding a stop sign as if telling him to stop. "This place is off-limits," the red-headed half-elf said. "Go back to where you came from." "You can't stop me," Daniel shouted as he clenched his fist to punch the bastard who dared to get in his way. He knew that he was unable to defeat Lux, but this half-elf in front of him was different from the one whom he was escaping from. Although they were both handsome and had similar features, there was a distinctive difference between their appearance. The red-headed half-elf sighed and scratched his head. "Oh well, don't say I didn't warn you." The half-elf then unceremoniously took out a chamber pot from who knows where and raised it like a tennis racket. "Eat *T, motherfucker," the half-elf said as the chamber pot in his hand grew as big as an entire mountain. With a casual slap from his chamber pot, Daniel was sent flying backward at the speed of light. After what seemed like an eternity of pain, he finally came to a stop and clutched his chest. It was at this moment that someone placed a hand over his shoulder and whispered something in his ear. "You couldn't live with your own failure," Lux said as if he was giving someone some life coaching. "Where did that bring you?" "Back to me." "Ah!" Daniel shouted as if he was going crazy. He tried to fly away once again, but this time, all his paths were blocked by countless undead, who had formed an insurmountable wall in every direction, leaving him no place to go. "It's useless," Lux said with a devilish smile on his face. "Get him, guys." Aya, 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 Aya. Countless baby slimes descended upon Daniel and body slammed him with their squishy bodies. Their attacks weren't enough to damage him physically, but when it came to emotional and spiritual damage, their simple attacks were like countless critical hits, making the pseudo-god scream in pain. A moment later, all the baby slimes retreated, replaced by the Elysians and Solaians whom Daniel had killed. All of them punched, kicked, slapped, smashed, and clapped him, forcing Daniel to fight back. He was literally drowning in souls, and no matter how many he sent flying, there would be others who would instantly take their place. "Enough!" Daniel roared as his body glowed brilliantly, creating a shockwave that pushed the souls that were piling up on his body like zombies. "What enough?" an annoyed voice asked. "Filthy Lowlander, you think that's enough? Eat my fist." Cephas smacked the side of Daniel's face, making the latter take a few steps back. Behind him, Flamma gave him a strong kick, sending the pseudo-god's body forward. Keen appeared and used the handle of his sword to unleash an uppercut that sent Daniel's body flying. But he was soon brought back down by a stomp by Cadmus, who descended above him. "Don't stop me. I'm going to smack this bastard silly," Cephas declared as he raised his fists and started to pummel Daniel's face while shouting, "Aura! Aura! Aura! Aura!" like a mad lad. The others crossed their arms over their chest as they let their friend vent out his anger and frustration. A baby slime then crawled near Cephas holding a signboard that said, "Time's up," making the Dragonborn stop his punches. Cephas clicked his tongue before picking up the baby slime and muttered, "You cheeky little thing," before stepping away from the pseudo-god. "Stop, please," Daniel begged. "No more." "Stop?" Lux asked. "Not happening." "Get him, boys." Countless Doom Knight bangers, as well as the satyrs who had joined the war, gangbanged Daniel, making him experience something that he had never experienced before. Cephas even covered the baby slime's eyes as if he wanted to prevent the little one from seeing such a barbaric thing. This continued for an entire hour before Lux thought that enough was enough. "At the beginning, I really tried to save Solais," Daniel said as he lay on the ground, battered and broken from the punishment that he received. "The reason why I wanted to become a god was because I believed that was the only way I would be able to do it." The pseudo-god then turned his head to look in Lux's direction. "Was I wrong?" Daniel asked. Is the method I chose to save everyone wrong? No, Lux replied firmly. Your method wasn't wrong, but your heart wasn't in the right place. Do you really think that if you truly wished to save Solais, your comrades, as well as its goddess would have stopped you with everything they had? The half-elf then shook his head. It was because the moment you tasted power, you wished to make others submit to you. This is why your comrades and the goddess did everything in their power to stop you. Absolute power corrupts people. If someone like you became a god, then the people of both Elysium and Solais would have suffered from your mood swings. Daniel chuckled. So you say, but aren't you going to do the same thing? The only way to save Solais is for you to become a god. What makes you think that you wouldn't follow my footsteps? You don't have to worry about that. He won't follow your footsteps. Lux and Daniel looked above them and saw several beautiful ladies together. The half-elf's gaze softened when he saw that his lovers and their mothers were safe and sound. He didn't see them among the souls of the dead when he had called out to them earlier, which only meant one thing. They were all alive and well. At the last second, Lily, Cupid, and Dim Dim saved the girls and temporarily took them to the celestial realm. Lux's heart is in the right place, Iris stated as she pressed her hand over her chest. We will keep it safe. He will not become like you, Kai said with conviction. We will not allow it. Whether it be the past Lux or the present Lux, he is still the same, Aina stated. This is why we believe that he will not be led astray, even with the power he is about to receive. Aurelia, Valerie, Ali, and Ari all nodded their heads at the same time, agreeing with their sisters. He is my grand disciple, so he will not take the wrong path, Hirswith, whom Lux had freed earlier, declared. Because if he did, I would have buried him in my breasts in order to rehabilitate him. Huh? What? No way. Lux's lovers immediately reacted, making Hirswith giggle. She only meant it as a joke, but as everyone knew, jokes were half-truths. I see in that case, all of you should die. Daniel forcefully compressed all of his power inside his body in order to self-destruct. Even if he died, he wanted Lux to suffer from heartache after truly losing his lovers. At least, that was what he hoped to do. But after he reached the limit of his powers, something unexpected happened. The golden lion and the golden scales flew out of his body and merged with the golden locket hanging on Lux's chest. Lux already knew that Daniel might self-destruct, but he wasn't worried about it. After all, he and death were now best friends, so there was no longer any need for him to fear death. A powerful explosion erupted within the void battlefield, sweeping across its width in fiery flames. Daniel was only a step away from being a god, so his final gambit was as strong as the explosion of a star, able to destroy the worlds around it. With this, he believed that he would have dealt a blow to the half-elf, who had thwarted his plans. But as his soul looked at the hellish inferno that he had caused, he noticed that there was a place that was left untouched by the flames, and it was where the half-elf's lovers were standing. Suddenly, a black coffin appeared in front of Daniel's soul. Its lid slid open, and within the darkness, several rows of teeth forming a smile appeared, making Daniel's soul shudder. As a last-ditch effort, his soul tried to flee, but it was useless. Countless black hands grabbed hold of him, and slowly but surely, they dragged him toward the black coffin, where a fate worse than death waited for him. All things are equal in death. Let this be a sign. Do not hold your breath because your immortal soul is now mine. No. Daniel desperately tried to escape, but as soon as his soul was dragged inside the coffin, its lid shut close, sealing his fate. From within Blackfire's darkness, Leonidas, as well as the other creatures whom Blackfire had absorbed, looked at their new playmate with devilish eyes. It's gangbang time, Leonidas roared. Ahu, 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 ahu. Daniel's screams echoed within the darkness, but his voice didn't reach anyone. For Lux had sentenced him to 100 years of suffering before his soul would be tossed into the river of flames within the pits of hell for hundreds of years of torment. Outside of Blackfire's body, several angels danced above Lux, including his battle angel, Seraphina, whose smile was as radiant as the sun. In the boundless expanse of time. Eternity's song, a sweet rhyme. No beginning, no final chime. Endless, infinite, a wondrous climb. Eternal moments, forever sublime. Gathering the 5 pillars of eternity, a golden stairway appeared in front of Lux, and the gates to the temple of the 10,000 gods appeared before him. The half-elf glanced at his wives, and they all nodded their heads in unison. "Come back soon so that everyone can go home," Iris said softly as she hugged Lux. "We still have a lot of things to talk about, including your baby that you hid from us," Kai said in a disapproving tone as she too hugged Lux. "You said that you would help me meet my sister, so come back soon, okay?" Aina cupped Lux's face and gave him a kiss on the lips. "That one is for me. This one is for my sister." The beautiful dwarf gave Lux 2 kisses, making the other girls do the same. "We'll be here waiting," Aurelia said after she finished kissing Lux. "Of course, our baby will wait for you as well." The dragon princess lightly caressed her abdomen, which made the half-elf touch it too. His free hand, however, was taken by Valerie and pressed on her own abdomen, while looking at Lux with a face filled with injustice. "Unfair. I should have been the one to give birth to your first baby, but someone beat me to it," Valerie said with a pout. "I demand compensation." "What kind of compensation?" Lux asked with an amused look on his face. "I'll tell you when you get back." "Okay." Ari then hugged Lux from behind and whispered seductively in his ears. "Don't forget your promise, Papa," Ari said. "After Valerie gives birth, it will be my turn." "Our turn," Ollie corrected as she hugged Lux from the side and kissed his cheek. "I want to have your baby too. Don't make me wait for too long, okay?" "Okay," Lux replied as he kissed his 2 beautiful handmaidens, who made their intentions known to him. The half-elf then glanced at Aurora, who was waiting for her turn. She was once the goddess of Solais, and now she was a transcendent succubus. Her lives had many ups and downs, but after meeting Lux, she felt that all of those sufferings had finally borne fruit because she found someone who would love her till the end of time. "Come with me, Aurora," Lux said as he extended his hand toward his lover, making her eyes widen in shock. I can't," Aurora replied. "I am no longer a goddess." "Trust me," Lux said with his hand still reaching out to her, waiting for her to take it. Aurora looked at Lux's outstretched hand before firmly shaking her head. "I've been a god before, Lux," Aurora said as she held his hand with both of her hands. "That's why I can say this with confidence. I'd rather be in your bed, making love to you, than spend eternity managing the lives of mortals." Lux's smile widened after hearing Aurora's reply. He then glanced at the top of the staircase and smirked. "You heard her," Lux said. "My fiancé wants to retire. The 2 of you should handle things from here on out." Ariel and Max, who were standing at the gates of the temple of the 10,000 gods, glanced at each other before smiling bitterly. They planned to make Lux handle everything so that the 2 of them could take a break. They had been working hard for so long, and they wanted to take a vacation somewhere, so they could finally work on the anime called No Game No Waifu Season 2. Lux laughed after seeing the 2 gods' bitter faces. He knew what they were planning to do, so he decided to decline their offer to become a god. He would rather spend his days making love to his wives and taking care of his babies rather than become a god. He also had no intention of becoming a god because he didn't want to be away from his lovers and be forced to simply watch over the affairs of mortal men. Lux raised his staff and prepared to use his powers to make everyone who was waiting in Solais and Elysium happy. The 5 pillars of eternity that had merged with the golden locket glowed brightly, making Lux shine within the darkness of the void battlefield as if he were a newborn star that was about to shine upon the world. A few moments later, Cephas, Keen, Gerhardt, Cadmus, Flamma, Kyoza, King Azza, Lady Augustina, Lady Faustina, and the rest of those who had died in battle were all resurrected. They didn't turn into undead but had undergone true resurrection due to the miraculous powers of the pillars of eternity that were capable of ascending someone into a god. Looking at the faces of everyone who had been resurrected using his power, Lux held Aurora's and Iris' hands and took a step forward. "Let's go home," Lux said, "to the place where we all belong. Somewhere in Solais." When the Abyssal army invaded Solais, most of the kingdoms and empires fell due to the sheer difference in strength between the two sides. The Abyssal lords killed those who resisted and enslaved those who submitted. There were several Abyssal lords and other Abyssal monsters that weren't affected by the miasma. Because of this, they were able to move unhindered across the land. 4 of these Abyssal lords had formed a raiding team alongside their subordinates, and they conquered one territory after the other. Knowing that no one could stand in their way, they all felt fearless. Since the connection between the Abyss and Solais had been severed, all of them thought that it would be best to make the entirety of Solais their new domain. I can sense a dense amount of life force in that direction, an Abyssal lord who looked like a centaur said. Great! An Abyssal lord who looked like a harpy smirked. You take all the ladies, and I'll take all the men. Both of you are too greedy, an ogre Abyssal lord commented. I'll take the kids. They taste good. SK. You all should tone down a bit, a gargoyle Abyssal lord stated. Ha ha ha. A few minutes later, they passed through the dense layer of miasma and appeared in the lands of the 6 kingdoms. It seems that all the living people in this territory are gathered in one spot, the centaur said. Well, that just makes our job easier, the harpy stated. Race you. Without a warning, the harpy increased her speed and laughed loudly, leaving behind her comrades. Damn hag, the ogre cursed. As the slowest in their group, it would definitely be the last person to arrive at the location where the people of the territory were gathered. Even so, it still did its best to run as fast as it could, creating minor tremors as it ran. The Harpy Queen, who had a head start, arrived first at the city, where Barbados Academy was located. She was pleasantly surprised to see that the people in the city looked so happy as if there was some kind of festival. This made her sadistic nature rise up to the surface as she decided to descend to give everyone a scare. But just as she was about to descend, she saw a giggling baby blue slime sitting on the back of a baby sea otter. The two of them seemed to be playing and flying in circles around the city. They didn't even pay attention to the Abyssal Lord who was hovering hundreds of meters away from them. The thing that surprised the Harpy Queen was that the sea otter was actually flying, which piqued her interest. This was the first time she had seen such a thing, and she thought that taking it as a pet was a good idea. Well, these humans are not going anywhere, the Harpy Queen mused as she flew towards the two creatures who seemed to be having fun. Lucky, who was flying without a care in the world, suddenly stopped mid-air when the Harpy Queen suddenly blocked his path. Well, hello there, my little pretties, the Harpy Queen said with a smile. Both of you seem to be having fun. Can this big sister join you as well? Aiko looked at the Harpy Queen with great interest. This was the first time she was seeing a harpy, and she thought that making it her pet would be good. Suddenly, a loud laugh reverberated in the surroundings as the centaur and the gargoyle arrived. Seeing so many beautiful ladies, the centaur wasn't able to stop himself from laughing, making the Harpy Queen snort. But just as the centaur was about to start harassing the ladies, a giant golden anchor descended from the sky and crushed his body entirely. The gargoyle, who was dozens of meters away from his comrade, hastily backed away after seeing the golden anchor crush his comrade. A few seconds later, the golden anchor shrank and flew toward the baby slime, who caught it like a boomerang. The Harpy Queen stared at the harmless-looking slime in front of her in disbelief. The centaur was the second strongest Abyssal Lord in their group, second only to the ogre, who was still a good distance away from the city. Even now, she couldn't feel the baby slime's rank as if it was just an ordinary slime that could be seen anywhere. She even thought that the abyssal slimes, which could be found everywhere in the abyss, had more presence than the baby slime in front of her, which made her only think of one possibility. This baby slime is stronger than us. The Harpy Queen couldn't help but feel that she narrowly dodged death just a minute ago. She believed that if she even released the tiniest bit of killing intent toward the two little creatures in front of her, she would have died not knowing how she died, just like the centaur. The abyssal army that belonged to the 4 abyssal lords finally arrived in the city. However, before they could do anything, a fountain of blood erupted, decimating a quarter of the abyssal army in a heartbeat. The Harpy Queen and the gargoyle could only look in horror as their gazes landed on the back of a black knight, whose cape fluttered in the wind. Diablo swung his sword a second time, reaping the lives of thousands of monsters with a single strike. Eiko, who was also watching this scene, was busy licking a pink lollipop that the goddess Lily had given her before she returned to the celestial realm. Diablo made short work of the entirety of the Abyssal army, not allowing even a single one of them to escape. When the ogre finally arrived at the city, its sight was welcomed by the bloody scene in front of it, making it stop in its tracks. However, before it could even ask its comrades what had happened, its vision spun. A moment later, it saw its headless body still standing, with blood gushing out of its neck like a fountain. When its body fell to the ground, it finally saw who had killed it. A black knight whose blade was stained by the blood of its victims. The ogre's eyes finally dimmed as death finally embraced it. The gargoyle suddenly retreated as fast as it could, believing that the black knight wouldn't be able to catch it in the sky. But half a minute later, a beam of light illuminated the heavens, completely obliterating the gargoyle, not even leaving a speck of dust behind. High above Eiko's head, Poseidon hovered silently. It had the ability to turn completely invisible and hide its presence, which was why the Harpy Queen and its comrades were unable to sense it. Now that all of her comrades were dead, the Harpy Queen felt as if there was an invisible rope tied around her neck, ready to strangle her if she made a wrong move. "Want to be my pet?" Eiko asked. "Yes," the Harpy Queen immediately replied. "Make me your pet." Just as Eiko was about to nod her head, a golden beam of light suddenly shot up toward the sky, creating a golden ripple that extended outward. This ripple purified the miasma in the surroundings and slowly encompassed the entirety of Solais. The Abyssal Lords, who were still lording over the kingdoms and empires that they had subjugated, felt a chill run down their spine when the golden ripple passed over them. A minute later, a voice filled with killing intent washed over them like a tide, making all of their faces turn grim. "Wash your necks. I'm coming for you." The Harpy Queen, who also heard the voice, trembled in fear. "Eiko, I'm done," Lux said as he appeared right beside the baby slime. "Who's this?" The half-elf eyed the Harpy Queen, which made the Abyssal Lord's heart shudder. "My pet," Eiko said proudly. "Your pet? I see." Lux gave the Harpy Queen an evil smile, making the latter almost faint. "Take good care of your pet, okay?" "Pa." Eiko nodded. "Let's play a game, Eiko," Lux said as he patted the baby slime's head. "I'll take north and east, while you take south and west. The first one to clean up all the abyssal monsters gets a prize." "Okay," Eiko agreed. "Come, Pippi." Pippi," the Harpy Queen stuttered as the baby slime motioned for her to follow. However, after sensing Lux's gaze, she no longer said anything and quietly followed the excited baby slime, who seemed to be hellbent on winning the game that her papa had proposed. In just half a day, all the abyssal monsters were wiped out from the face of Solais. Those who didn't treat the people too harshly were spared, but those who had killed countless lives didn't receive any mercy. A day after that, a gigantic tree grew behind Barbados Academy. This was the world tree created with the power of all the pillars of eternity. With its appearance, the world entered a phase of rebirth, granting old and new wounds the opportunity to heal with time. Luna sighed for the umpteenth time, as she stared at the picture frame in her hands. It was a picture of Lux and her posing for a commemorative photo before their ballroom scene was filmed. There were other picture frames hanging on her wall, and one of them was taken when she and Lux went out on a date, when the two of them had a day off from work. Back then, they still hadn't made their feelings known to each other. And yet, their closeness was enough for both of them to understand what the other truly felt. Glancing at the clock, Luna knew that it was finally time to go. "I'm off, Lux," Luna said softly before kissing the half-elf in the picture. She then placed the picture frame back on the table beside her bed before leaving her room. Today, she was going to audition for the leading role of a movie adaptation. This was another big production that many actors and actresses were aiming to get. Since she had nothing better to do with her time, she decided to take a chance at it, while waiting for her beloved to return to her. 8:58. Since she had nothing better to do with her time, she decided to take a chance at it, while waiting for her beloved to return to her. Are you confident in getting the role? Holly asked as she drove the car towards their destination. All I can say is that I'll do my best, Luna replied. If I get it, then good. If not, then there's always other projects to join. That's right. There are many opportunities out there waiting for you. Just take one step at a time. MMM. When they arrived at the venue where the actors and actresses would be screened, Luna felt someone staring at her. This wasn't the first time that something like this happened, so she was already used to it. But this time, she felt very uncomfortable, as if the one staring at her was looking at her with malicious intent. Glancing in the direction where she felt the gaze was coming from, he saw a handsome young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. She immediately recognized him as one of the producers of the movie that she planned to audition for. Don't look at that creep, Gustav, Holly whispered. He's always chasing the skirts of promising young actresses who don't have a strong backing. Many in the industry have already been ruined by him. So, if he approaches you, just firmly reject him. It doesn't matter if you don't get this role or not. It's much better than being this guy's plaything. Luna nodded and no longer paid attention to the producer, who was looking at her with lustful eyes. There was one project she had participated in where Gustav had been one of the producers of the show, and he made a move on Luna. Fortunately, Holly was always with her, so he backed down when Luna's manager threatened to sue him. Even so, he had been eyeing Luna since her Idol days, and he was one of her fans. But he wanted to be more than a fan. He wanted her, which made him decide to join this big production as one of its producers. Gustav was one of the people who had the authority to pick the roles for the actors and actresses who would be auditioning today. He had already prepared the perfect bait for Luna, who had done everything in her power to stay out of his sight. Her record in the industry was quite clean. But when Lux appeared in her life, Gustav knew that he needed to make his move before his target was stolen away from him. Fortunately, the red-headed teenager disappeared, and although Gustav tried to find him, he wasn't even able to find the young man's shadow. Still, he gathered enough material and even fabricated a scandal that could destroy Luna's career once he made it public. Simply put, he planned to blackmail Luna in order to make her his plaything, which was something that he had been planning to do for a long time. 2 hours later, Luna finished her audition and was about to go to where Holly was waiting for her. That was when she met Gustav in the hallway. Luna had found it weird that no one was in the hallway when she finished her audition. Now that she was seeing the man in front of her, she finally understood the situation. "What do you want?" Luna asked, not moving from where she stood. "You," Gustav replied as he walked towards the young actress, whom he had violated so many times in his fantasies. "You're the one I want, Luna." Luna knew that she couldn't move forward, so she decided to return to where she had come from. But just as she was about to do that, 3 men wearing black appeared at the other end of the hallway. Clearly, they had no intention of letting go. "You know, if you just say yes, I promise you that you will live a very fulfilling life," Gustav said. "You will get the leading roles of any projects that you wish to have with my help. Most new actresses would jump at the opportunity to be in your shoes, Luna. So, why not become my woman and make your dreams come true?" "I don't need you to make my dreams come true," Luna replied coldly. "If you don't let me go, I'm going to scream." "Go ahead." Gustav smiled. "Although I'd like to make you scream in bed, hearing it now is also good." Luna knew that if she didn't do anything now, it would end up badly for her. At that moment, a scream echoed in the hallway. However, it wasn't the scream of a lady, but the scream of a man, whose arm was bent in a weird angle. Luna's eyes widened in shock when she saw a girl who looked just like her younger self. After breaking Gustav's right arm, the girl went ahead to break his other arm, making Gustav scream a second time. The men in black suits, who were behind Luna, immediately moved to rescue their employer. But they only managed to take a few steps when they suddenly collapsed on the ground, unconscious. Luna looked at the young man, whom she hadn't seen for a while, making her cover her lips to hold back a sob. Lux hugged the lady he loved and planted a kiss on her forehead. "You and your sister still have a lot of catching up to do, so why don't you leave first?" Lux said before wiping the tears that had now started to fall from Luna's eyes. "Don't worry. I'll just do a bit of cleanup, and follow the two of you right away, okay? Luna nodded before running towards her beloved sister, whom she hadn't seen in many years. A moment later, both of them disappeared from the hallway, leaving only a screaming Gustav behind. Lux's smile disappeared from his face as he walked towards the man who tried to harm his woman. Soon, more screams of pain reverberated inside the hallway, as Lux made sure that Gustav would never threaten a woman again in his lifetime. When Lux found Luna and Aina, the pair of sisters were hugging each other tightly. If you looked at them from afar, they would look like an older sister and a little sister showing their familial love to each other. When they noticed the half-elf's arrival, the two ladies looked at him askance. "Everything's fine," Lux said. "I've dealt with him." "Did you kill him?" Aina asked. Although she tried hard to hide it, her killing intent was oozing from her body. She had been very tempted earlier to personally snap Gustav's neck, but Lux asked her to calm down through telepathy. Because of this, she decided to just break both of his arms to make sure that he would feel a lot of pain. Lux didn't stop his lover from doing so, since even he wanted to do the same. He knew that Luna was very precious to Aina, and those who tried to harm her sister would no doubt be crushed by her own two hands. "He's halfway there," Lux replied. "Good." Aina nodded before hugging her sister once again. Luna's face was already a mess. Her tears had ruined her makeup, and yet, Lux still found her beautiful. "Let's leave this place for now," Lux proposed. "Let's go somewhere that is not too conspicuous." With a wave of his hand, the three of them reappeared inside Luna's condo unit in an instant. "You better give Holly a call first, so she won't panic when she can't find you in the venue," Lux said with a smile. Luna had completely forgotten about her manager after seeing her sister whom she hadn't seen for years. She hastily made a call, telling Holly that she had left the venue and went shopping on her own. Although the excuse she made was a bit sketchy, her manager didn't pry and just told her to be careful and to return home as soon as she could. After that matter had been dealt with, she sat on the couch with her sister and held her tightly. "Is this a dream?" Luna asked. "If it is, I no longer want to wake up." "Silly girl," Lux gently patted her head. "Of course, this isn't a dream. From now on, you will be able to see your sister anytime you want. But aside from Aina, you've also gained a new little sister that goes by the name Colette." Aina nodded and looked at her sister with gentle eyes. "She's a very lovable girl," Aina said. "I'm sure you will like her." "I know I will," Luna replied. "But for now, stay with me, okay?" "MMM. Thank you." An hour later, Luna finally regained her composure and asked Lux if the important matter that he had to deal with was finally over. "Do you want to hear the long story or the short summary?" Lux asked in a teasing tone. "The short summary, please," Luna replied. The half-elf nodded and told her the summary of what had happened after he returned to Elysium. While he was busy explaining things to Luna, several little creatures were exploring the city on their own. Just make sure to not stray too far from me, okay?" Kazaganaga said to the little ones, who were following behind him. "If you get lost, it will be a big problem." The way. Dim. A week after the battle in the Void battlefield, James surprised Lux by telling him that he had successfully established a connection between Elysium and Earth. However, since the connection was still not that stable, only a few people could travel from Elysium to Earth using the Bifrost Bridge. James had other things to do, so the old bandit asked the rainbow-colored anteater to guide Lux to Earth. Lux and Aina went off to find Luna, while the little ones decided to explore this brand new world together. Kasaganaga became their guide and nanny. He didn't mind since he believed that the two baby slimes, the sea otter, and Dim were all good kids. When Aiko and Fei saw a cake shop, the two baby slimes drooled as they looked at the cakes that were on display. "Do you want to take a look inside?" Kazaganaga asked. "Don't worry. All of you can eat as much as you want. I have a platinum card with me. The sky's the limit." "Yay. Way." Dim. Kazaganaga entered the shop with confidence and was immediately mobbed by the customers, as well as the staff of the shop. Since he was a super celebrity, they all wanted his autograph and a selfie with him. Of course, Kazaganaga didn't disappoint his fans and posed with them. "What's this?" Why are they so cute? They look so jiggly as well. This dim sum looks good. I feel hungry now. The ladies inside the cake shop weren't able to resist Aiko's, Fei-Fei's, Lucky's, and Dim Dim's cuteness, making them fangirl over them. If not for the fact that they didn't want to offend Kasaganaga, they would have already picked up the cute monsters and peppered them with kisses. Meanwhile, back in Luna's condo, Lux had finished telling Luna his tale, shocking her completely. Seeing the dumbfounded look on her face, Lux couldn't help but lightly pinch her cheeks, so she would snap out of her daze. "Aina, why don't you take a bath with your sister for now?" Lux proposed. The beautiful dwarf nodded because her sister's face was truly a mess. Although she didn't mind it, she wanted her sister to feel relaxed and comfortable, so she took her to the bathroom to take a bath together. Lux, on the other hand, glanced in the direction where Aiko and the others were. The half-elf couldn't help but smile after seeing that the four little troublemakers were busy eating all types of cakes. He continued to watch their little adventure in the city, completely forgetting about the passage of time. The half-elf only broke out of his daze when he felt someone touch the side of his face. When he turned to look at Aina, his body subconsciously stiffened when he saw that she and her sister, Luna, only had bath towels covering their bodies. Their hair was also still a bit wet, and both of them smelled really nice. At that exact moment, he heard a notification from the guild chat and saw Cephas complain about him going to Earth without bringing them along. "Come back and take us to Earth as well," Cephas demanded. "I want to see what the low landers of this place called Earth are like." Lux casually ignored Cephas' demand and even turned off the notifications of his guild chat. He then allowed himself to be pulled by the two beautiful ladies toward the bedroom, where they would talk about important matters. "Yes, this is more important than Cephas." Lux smiled as he lightly tugged on the bath towels covering the bodies of his two lovers, making them fall down beside their feet. Lux couldn't help but admire the two beauties in front of him, so he firmly put aside Cephas' selfish demands. Demands that could wait until he, Luna, and Aina had finished sating the cravings of their bodies and hearts, which had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. While Lux, Aina, and the cute troublemakers were having fun on Earth, some unexpected guests arrived on the floating island of Heaven's Gate. The original floating island had been completely destroyed by Daniel. However, since the floating island and the giant earth turtle were merged into becoming a single entity, the half-elf was able to resurrect it. For the time being, members of Heaven's Gate used the royal palace of the Finn Kingdom as their temporary lodgings while their guild headquarters were being rebuilt. Everyone's gaze landed on the old man wearing an eye patch and then on the extremely beautiful woman behind him. Aurora, who saw them, smiled sweetly and immediately approached Queen Rhiannon, who was holding her little sister, Dia, in her arms. Iris, Kai, Valerie, Aurelia, Ollie, and Ari immediately figured out who the woman was and the baby that she was holding. The ladies didn't move from their spot and only looked at the succubus queen warily, which amused Queen Rhiannon. Aurora knew what her sisters were thinking, so she decided to take the initiative to introduce her mother to them. 1038. Aurora knew what her sisters were thinking, so she decided to take the initiative to introduce her mother to them. "This is Queen Rhiannon. As you already know, she is the ruler of the 13th layer of the Abyss," Aurora replied. "And this cute baby in my arms is none other than Dia, Lux's baby. Isn't she adorable?" Aurora, who was already holding Dia in her arms, walked toward her sisters and allowed them to have a better look at Lux's first child. Iris fell in love with the baby the moment she saw how chubby Dia's cheeks were. She lightly poked the baby's chubby cheeks, making her feel something warm spreading inside her chest. Dia, who had been poked, smiled immediately, making her whole face brighten up. She then made gurgling sounds as if trying to communicate with Iris. This gesture of hers was too cute, making everyone's heart melt. "I can't take it," Kai said as she gently touched Dia's small hand with her finger. "Can we keep her?" "No," Queen Rhiannon replied with a smile, "but you can play with her anytime you want." As if confirming her mother's words, Dia's hand curled up to hold Kai's finger, making the High Priestess press her hand over her heart due to how moved she was. "Dia says we can keep her." Ari was quick to comment because she could sense Lux's bloodline flowing inside Dia's body. Any objections? No objections. As someone who had been intimate with the half-elf in various ways, she immediately sensed that the baby was truly her lover's child. Queen Rhiannon could only shake her head helplessly as she looked at Lux's other lovers. The beautiful ladies fawned over Lux's baby and took turns holding Dia, kissing her chubby cheeks and making the baby giggle. Queen Rhiannon watched this scene fondly and allowed the beautiful ladies to do what they wanted. Although she felt a little guilty about giving birth to Lux's child first before his future wives, she didn't regret it. She might have decided to give birth to Lux's child on a whim, but during the months that she carried Dia in her womb, the succubus queen knew then and there that this was a child that she would love with all of her heart. Queen Rhiannon knew that she wasn't a good mother because of what happened with Aurora. However, this time, she wanted to do it right. A few minutes later, a handsome man, who seemed to be in his early 40s, appeared beside Queen Rhiannon. He held a scholarly aura, but his gaze was deep and profound, making those who looked at him know that he wasn't someone ordinary. The Bifrost Bridge is not stable yet, so the rest on the 13th layer will have to wait for a few more days before they can come to visit this place, the handsome man said. Thank you, Lord Intero, Queen Rhiannon replied. The connection wouldn't have been made so quickly if not for your help. It is just a small matter, little Rhiannon, Intero, who had taken a human form, replied. I cannot stay here for long because there are matters that I need to attend to in the abyss. When Lux returns, call for me. Understood. Queen Rhiannon nodded. The handsome man then glanced at Lux's lovers, who were taking turns in holding his granddaughter. A moment later, he disappeared, returning to the abyss in order to stabilize the civil wars that were taking place on the layers that had lost their leaders. It would take a few years before order returned to the abyss. Antero didn't plan on doing anything to stop the fight for power. He just wanted to make sure that none of the abyssal monsters did anything stupid, such as going to the lowest layer to wake up the outer god, who was still sleeping despite everything that had happened. Antero understood that this was a normal thing. For outer gods like Azathoth, the mundane affairs of mortals were just a trivial thing. They were too tiny and insignificant for someone like it to actually care, so despite someone leeching off him, he couldn't care enough to wake up from his slumber and continued to dream. An hour later, the atmosphere between the ladies became lively. Everyone was smitten with Dia, so they no longer thought of the succubus queen as their enemy. Since she was still a baby, Dia got tired easily, and soon, she was peacefully sleeping in Valerie's arms. So this is what it feels like to have a baby, Valerie thought as she lovingly and carefully held the child in her arms as if holding a priceless treasure. Seeing this, Aurelia couldn't help but touch her abdomen. A few months from now, she would also give birth to Lux's child. She was certain that she would also be very happy once she saw and held her own child for the first time. That's it, Kai said softly. When Lux returns, I'll ask him to get me pregnant as well. Me too. Iris nodded. In the past, she thought that she would be the one to give birth to Lux's child first. When she discovered that Valerie and Aurelia were already pregnant, she uncontrollably felt sad, feeling like something important had been taken from her. Even so, this feeling didn't last for long and was replaced with the happiness of knowing that their family was getting bigger. She knew that a year or two from now, she, too, would be holding her baby in her arms, making her feel complete. For the time being, she decided to treat Lux's babies as her own. The funny thing was that she wasn't the only one thinking along those lines. Kai, Ollie, Ari, and Aurora were all thinking the same. They also wished to hold their own babies in their arms as soon as possible. But for the time being, they were content with taking turns kissing and holding Dia and looking forward to her growth. Several years in the future, Dia would step out into the multiverse to find her own destined one. A man who would have to overcome the hurdle named Lux before he could hold hands with the young lady whom he was going to share forever with. Echo hummed as she, Fei, and Dim Dim held small fishing poles in their hands. The three troublemakers were seated on Lux's right side, who also had a fishing pole in his hand. It had been a month since their exploration on Earth, and the three of them had a great time. Lux took them to amusement parks, watched movies, played some games, and did anything fun that they could think of. Luna became their guide, and took them to the places where she had wanted to go in the past. However, she wasn't able to do it because of the heartache that she felt after losing her grandparents and sister, whom she loved very much. Lux returned to Elysium every few days to ensure that no problem had occurred during his absence. It was also at that time when King Azza found him and invited him on a fishing trip, which he readily accepted. Sitting on the half-elf's left side was none other than King Azza, and Kyoza sat beside the Dragon King. Sitting beside Kyoza was none other than Aina's father, King Victor. They, too, were holding fishing poles in their hands. All of them were seated on a cliff, overlooking the sea. 300 meters away from them, the ladies were seated on picnic blankets and chatting with each other. None of them were aware that the purpose of this fishing trip was to feed Lux to the fishes so that he would disappear by accident. At least, that was the original plan in the past. This location was swarming with Empyrean-ranked sea monsters, so it was very easy for a low-ranker to become fish food in a heartbeat. But the current half-elf was no longer the weakling of the past. Empyrean-ranked monsters were now food to him, so he thought that this fishing trip was something that his father-in-laws had set up, so that they could form closer bonds with each other. The two Dragon Kings had unreadable looks on their faces, while the Dwarf King was wondering why he was included on this fishing trip. Only the three troublemakers seemed to be enjoying their first fishing trip together and were looking forward to catching something. The Deimos, Argonaut, and Empyrean-ranked sea monsters, on the other hand, had all evacuated the area when they sensed the presence of the powerful beings who had come to catch them. Only the lower-ranked monsters, who still couldn't measure the level of someone's strength, remained. One of those monsters bit the bait of Aiko's fishing pole and gave it a strong tug. Its intention was to bring the baby slime from the cliff and make it an appetizer. But, to its surprise, the baby slime didn't budge. Aiko, who noticed that something had bitten her bait, immediately turned around and pulled hard on the fishing pole, making the 2-meter-long rank 5 sea trout fall on land. Of course, as a rank 5 monster, it wouldn't really die on land that easily. It could casually leap back to the sea if it wanted, returning to its home turf. But before it could do that, it found itself getting body slammed by the 3 kids, who were very eager to play with the fish that Aiko caught. "Aiko, Fei, Dim, don't play with your food," Lux said as he glanced at the pitiful sea trout, who was being pinned down by the 3 troublemakers. "Pa," Aiko said before giving the sea trout a slap on its face. "Way," Fei replied before spitting a fireball on the sea trout's fins. Dim shouted happily as it jumped up and down on the sea trout's back, breaking its bones. 10 minutes later, Ollie and Ari were grilling the sea trout, which they would have for lunch. Aiko, Fei, and Dim returned to holding their fishing poles and were more eager than ever to catch more fishes to share with everyone. "Father, thank you for inviting me on this fishing trip," Lux said to King Azza, who still had his poker face activated. King Azza hummed. "Fishing trips are good from time to time." King Azza knew that if the half-elf was weaker than him, things might have ended differently for this fishing trip. But after the battle against Daniel, the half-elf's strength had reached the realm of a true pseudo-god. Lux could ascend to godhood any time, but he didn't take that step and chose to remain with the mortals in Solais and Elysium. In short, no high-ranking sea monsters in Elysium would dare to target the half-elf and treat him as fish food. Just a single glance from him was enough to sever the connection of their soul from their bodies, turning it into a living vessel without a soul. Even the current Dragon King, the one hailed as the strongest person in Elysium, wasn't safe from the power of death that the half-elf currently wielded. If Lux wished to live forever, he could do so because death was no longer a threat to him. "Father, Valerie told me that she wanted to have a dozen kids," Lux said. "While I am happy with that, I want you to help me convince her that having that many babies might have an effect on her health. I think 4 babies are fine. What do you think?" "4 is good," King Azza nodded. "Don't worry, I'll talk to her later." "Thank you, Father." Lux nodded. Kyoza, who was listening from the side, decided to ask Lux a question. "How about Aurelia?" Kyoza asked. "Did she tell you how many children she wanted?" Lux nodded. Aurelia said that she wanted 2 children. Since I will have a lot of kids, she thinks that giving birth to more than that is not necessary. I see, Kyoza replied. I am also looking forward to seeing my first grandchild soon. I am just excited as you are, father. Lux smiled. He knew how much courage it took for Aurelia to take that next step in their relationship and give birth to his child. Truth be told, the half-elf didn't know if she only said those things back then due to the effect of the aphrodisiac, or because she felt competitive with Valerie. But when he asked her for confirmation, she told him that she was still thinking properly even when she was influenced by the aphrodisiac. Although the aphrodisiac played its part, Aurelia was the one who decided to take the leap of faith, which caused her to end up pregnant. Dragons didn't conceive easily. They could go on for hundreds of years without giving birth, so when she found out that she was pregnant with Lux's child, it made her very happy. That day, Lux, King Azza, Kyoza, and King Victor didn't catch any fish and only chatted with each other. It was only Eiko, Fei Fei, and Dim Dim who actually caught the fish that their group ate during their first fishing trip together. Although it didn't end up like the Dragon Kings originally planned, they still found this trip worth their while. Since their daughters were already carrying his children, the two Dragon Kings asked him when the wedding ceremony would be held. Lux thought that it was also about time that he married his lovers, so he decided to consult the two Dragon Kings when the best day to hold the marriage would be. Since it was going to be a big event, they decided to hold the wedding day in half a year, which would give them enough time to prepare the venue, as well as send invitations to all the important people in both Solais and Elysium. This is an emergency, Princess Anastasia said with a solemn expression on her face. Sir Lux is going to get married soon, but we still haven't made any progress with our relationship with him. What should we do? Why are you asking me? Henrietta asked. Isn't it obvious? Didn't your fiancé break up with you because he fell in love with someone else? Princess Anastasia replied. And Henrietta blinked in confusion. That means you're free and can now pursue Sir Lux too. Huh. Henrietta, who had come to visit Lux's guild headquarters in order to relax, was suddenly invited over by the dwarven princess, who had also come over for a visit. Since Anastasia was now part of Heaven's Gate, she often talked with Iris to ask for advice on how to get closer to the handsome half-elf of her dreams. During one of their talks, Iris mentioned that she was feeling sad because Henrietta's fiancé had one-sidedly broken their marriage agreement in order to pursue the person he loved. While it was no secret that they didn't love each other and were just engaged because their families thought that the marriage alliance would strengthen both sides, she still felt bad that Henrietta, who had steeled herself to go through with the marriage, was suddenly left alone. Of course, Iris wanted one of her best friends to also be happy in life, so she believed that this was a blessing in disguise. Even so, Henrietta seemed to be feeling down after her engagement was canceled. It had been a week since then. Iris had mentioned that Henrietta might have feelings for Lux, but was forced to hide them inside her heart because of her current situation. After listening to Lux's first fiancé, Princess Anastasia thought that she had finally found an ally. This was also why she didn't hesitate to invite Henrietta to have some tea with her in the guest room that was provided for her in the Finn Royal Palace. Don't worry, the two of us are not alone. Princess Anastasia held Henrietta's hand. We still have one more ally that we can count on. Like I said, why are you dragging me into tea? Henrietta's words were cut short after they heard a knock on the door. Millie, who was Princess Anastasia's protector, walked toward the door and opened it. This is what I like about you, Anastasia. You don't waste time. Big sister, thank you for coming. Henrietta's face became solemn as her gaze landed on the succubus queen, whom the dwarven princess referred to as a big sister. Although she knew that Queen Rhiannon wouldn't harm her now due to her relationship with Lux, the things that happened in the past were still fresh in her mind. Actually, after seeing the succubus queen, Henrietta suddenly remembered the time when she almost did it with the half-elf. If not for the fact that Lux stopped her from lowering her hips to seal the deal, things might have ended differently for the two of them. I can understand that you are wary of me, Henrietta, and I apologize for what has happened in the past. Queen Rhiannon slightly bowed her head to the young lady, whom she had made use of to test how much Lux and Kai loved one another while they were still in the abyss. I have already moved on from it, Henrietta replied. You don't have to worry about it anymore, Your Majesty. Queen Rhiannon smiled and nodded her head in understanding. Now that we have gathered, why don't we all talk about how to make the two of you become Lux's lovers as well? Queen Rhiannon pressed her hands together with an amused look on her face.
Yes.
Princess Anastasia looked at the succubus queen with sparkling eyes. I still need to do something, so I'll see you girls later. Henrietta had a very bad feeling about this, so she wanted to leave as soon as possible. When she was only a few meters away from the door, she heard a deep sigh coming from behind her. Henrietta, are you sure that you want to leave? Queen Rhiannon asked. Do you want to hide your true feelings and carry them to the grave? Didn't you already die once? Did you not have any regrets after you got killed in the void battlefield? Henrietta, whose hand was about to touch the door handle, momentarily froze. Just like everyone, she had also participated in the battle in the void battlefield. Actually, after Cephas died, Henrietta and a few members of her guild died not long after. They were doing their best to protect their guild headquarters from being overrun by riding on gyrocopters, but the enemy forces simply outnumbered them. Just as she was about to breathe her last, she felt an ache in her heart because, at the very last moment, she was unable to see the face of the person she liked. If someone asked Henrietta if she died with regrets, she would answer yes. She definitely regretted many things, and among them was not being able to say her true feelings. However, she didn't want to get in the way of Iris' love and supported her from behind. She focused her attention on managing the affairs of their guild, Serenity, in order to suppress the feelings, which she believed to only be puppy love. Henrietta, life is a gift, Princess Anastasia said. You've been given a second chance at life. Do you want to die without even trying? Do you want to die without even giving closure to your feelings? I don't want to live that kind of life, so I believe that we should be true to our feelings. Even if we get rejected, we can hold our heads high knowing that we did everything in our power to make it happen. If it doesn't really work out, then we can cry together. After that, we can look for someone else to love. Won't you at least give your feelings a chance? Princess Anastasia's gaze was firm as she looked at Henrietta's back. The purple-haired beauty's hand was now touching the door handle, but she didn't make any move to pull or push it open. She just stood there, digesting everything that the dwarven princess had told her. Queen Rhiannon didn't say anything because she believed that Princess Anastasia had already said what she wanted to say. If Henrietta still didn't change her mind, then there was nothing she could do about it. When the succubus queen and the dwarven princess thought that Henrietta would go ahead and leave the room, she suddenly asked them a question, making the two of them sigh in their hearts. Is it really okay? Henrietta asked without turning her head to look at the two people behind her. Can I really do what I want? Of course it's okay, Princess Anastasia replied. You only live once, twice. Don't worry, we are in this together. As someone who had managed to give birth to Lux's first child, I am confident that I can give the two of you some good advice, Queen Rhiannon stated. So why don't we all sit down and talk about it? Henrietta remained standing for a few more seconds before she turned around to return to the couch. She still didn't know if staying was the right thing to do, but she also felt that if she missed this chance, she would regret it later. Little did the four ladies know that just outside their door, Lux was holding a tray of freshly baked cookies from the kitchen. Because of his heightened senses, it didn't even take him any effort to hear what the three ladies were talking about inside the room. When he realized that they were talking about him, he thought that leaving them alone was a good idea. But Princess Anastasia's passionate speech rooted him in place. If Henrietta had opened the door at that time, she would have seen Lux in front of her, holding a tray of cookies in his hands. But that scenario didn't happen. Lux didn't leave immediately. Only after hearing what Henrietta had to say did he walk away from the guest room. He knew that things would just become awkward if he went in there while the three ladies were talking about him. The half-elf already knew Princess Anastasia's feelings about him, but this was the first time that he knew of Henrietta's thoughts about him. I guess I'll go talk to Iris for a bit, Lux thought as he used his powers to locate his lover inside the palace. When Lux finally disappeared from the hallway, a faint smile appeared on the succubus queen's lips. As one of the strongest demigods in existence, and as someone who had given birth to his child, Queen Rhiannon knew that Lux had been standing just outside of the door and had heard everything that had been said inside the room. Although he may not marry these two this year or the year after, I'm sure that their feelings have reached him, Queen Rhiannon thought as she looked at Princess Anastasia, who was busy giving Henrietta some encouragement while holding the young lady's hands. And just like the succubus queen had predicted, Lux did indeed marry Princess Anastasia and Henrietta a year after he wed Iris and the others, giving the two people who loved him very much a happy ending as well. Seductive moans echoed throughout the room as Lux embraced Aurora. Unfortunately, it was not only the two of them who were in the room. The succubus queen, Rhiannon, was also there to join in the fun. Dia was currently under the care of Iris and Kai. The two were more than happy to spend time with the cute and adorable baby who sparked their desire to have children of their own as soon as possible. Their wedding was only a month away. Right after that, Lux would finally ensure that all of them got pregnant, except for Ali and Ari, who said that they would wait until Valerie had safely given birth to her baby. They wanted to be there during that important moment and share her happiness. The twins viewed the dragon princess as their own little sister, whom they wanted to spoil very much. Amazing, isn't it? Queen Rhiannon said as he hugged Lux from behind, pressing her voluptuous chest against his back. Aurora will definitely surpass my beauty in a few years. You're lucky to have her as your wife. Lux didn't reply as he continued to kiss Aurora passionately, fully enjoying the feeling of being sandwiched between two beautiful ladies. One had already given birth to his child, and the other would soon conceive his child as well. Lux didn't reply as he continued to kiss Aurora passionately, fully enjoying the feeling of being sandwiched between two beautiful ladies. One had already given birth to his child, and the other would soon conceive his child as well. Queen Rhiannon still didn't know that her daughter was the former goddess of Solais, the goddess who had tried to stop Daniel from ascending into godhood, which cost her a huge price, the loss of her divinity and bearing the curse of endless bad luck as a mortal. But she didn't have any regrets. Aurora had finally wrestled control over the curse in her body. Instead of being controlled by it, she now controlled it, using it as a weapon if she had to. Anyone who dared to antagonize her would find themselves experiencing the worst luck in the world, which had been refined by countless years of suffering. Fortunately, those years of suffering had ended and would be replaced by years of happiness and pleasure with the man she loved. "What a sinful man you are, Lux," Queen Rhiannon whispered in the half-elf's ears the moment he joined with Aurora, moving his hips in a steady rhythm, making the beautiful lady under him sigh in pleasure. "Not only did you eat me, you've eaten my daughter as well. Sinful men like you deserve to be punished." The succubus queen then lightly turned the half-elf's head to the side before sealing it with her lips. Whoever made the Disho Yakadon needs a 5-star review, Lux thought as he immersed himself in this sinful display of love and affection. Since the succubus queen had already given birth to his child, she was technically now part of his family. Because of this, he decided to take responsibility and marry Queen Rhiannon as well, alongside her daughter, Aurora. With Antero making sure that the denizens of the abyss behaved, there was no immediate need for the succubus queen to return to the 13th layer. Also, since the old bandit, James, had connected the 13th layer of the abyss and Lux's guild headquarters with the Bifrost Bridge, she could come and go anytime she wanted. She also understood that she would find no better man than Lux in both Elysium and the abyss, so she decided that it was finally time for her to settle down. As for the rest of the succubi, there were plenty of bachelors in Elysium. With their charm, she was certain that they would find someone who would love and care for them deeply, just like the young man whom she was sharing a passionate kiss with. Lux lost count of how many times he released his essence under the combined attack of the mother and daughter pair. The only thing he knew was that he didn't have any regrets as the two of them cleaned little Lux together after 3 hours of making love with him. "I guess being a pseudo-god has its perks," Queen Rhiannon said in a teasing manner. "You're still so lively. Fortunately, you have many wives. Otherwise, just 1 or 2 would not be able to handle you on their own." The half-elf couldn't refute Queen Rhiannon's words because even after making love to 2 succubi, he was still raring to go. However, he knew that both were already tired, so after they finished cleaning little Lux, he took them to the bathroom and personally washed their bodies. He didn't make any moves to continue another round and earnestly cleaned them before taking them back to the bed. Of course, He made sure to change the sheets so that they could sleep comfortably side by side. His arms were wrapped around their beautiful bodies, while their heads rested on his chest. Aurora, how many kids do you want to have? Queen Rhiannon asked her daughter in a teasing tone. At least 2, Aurora replied. We can have more later, but I think having 4 is enough. After all, Lux will also have children from my other sisters. Indeed. Queen Rhiannon smiled. There is also a possibility that after he marries us, he will marry a new batch of wives later. Lux, who was being sandwiched by the 2 beauties, pretended that he was asleep as the 2 continued their conversation. Of course, they knew that the half-elf was just faking it, so they continued to chat while their hands caressed his chest, abs, and thigh, and also teased little Lux, who was more than ready to fight another round with their soft hands. Lux wasn't someone who actively sought to increase the number of his lovers. For him, the current lovers he had were enough. However, after overhearing the discussion between Queen Rhiannon, Princess Anastasia, and Henrietta, he decided to consult Iris and Kai about it. Ironically, his grandmaster, Hearswith, chose that time to visit him, so she also heard their discussion. She even jokingly said that if Lux was interested, he could marry her as well. But the half-elf knew that the beautiful elf was only joking. He already knew that Hearswith had someone in her heart, and it pained him to know that even with the powers he currently possessed, he was unable to give her the happiness that she deserved. In the end, Iris and Kai told him that they wouldn't have any problems if Lux were to marry Princess Anastasia and Henrietta. The half-elf then decided to consider this possibility right after his marriage with his current lovers. Aside from Iris, Kai, Aina, Valerie, Aurelia, Aurora, Ali, Ari, and Queen Rhiannon, the half-elf also planned to marry Luna. Fortunately, the young lady didn't need a lot of convincing, especially since she was already in love with Lux. The thought of living with him as a family with her sister, Aina, was more than enough reason for her to accept his proposal to marry him. It would not be an exaggeration to say that Lux was the most powerful individual in both Elysium and Solais, making some other rulers think about marrying their daughters to him to form stronger ties with him. But the half-elf had asked his father, Alexander, to reject all of these marriage proposals. After Princess Anastasia and Henrietta, who truly loved him, he had no interest in increasing the number of his wives. His friend, Keen, had married Rose 2 weeks ago and had gone on a honeymoon on Earth. The half-elf made sure that both of them got the best accommodation possible so that they could enjoy their newly married life. There were also a few others who had formed relationships during and after the war. Great General Garrett's 2 daughters, Alexa and Emily, were both secretly dating Gerhardt. The Great General only found out about it a week after the war ended, when he found his 2 daughters inside Gerhardt's room, lying on top of his bed, and playing cards with him. A/N, Kakik. When Garrett saw this scene, he immediately asked his daughters to leave and had a private talk with Gerhardt. The half-elf confessed that he was in a relationship with the general's 2 daughters. In the end, the general gave them his blessing. After all, he knew what kind of person Gerhardt was. He believed that the half-elf would take good care of his daughters. They seemed to be really smitten with him as well. But what surprised Lux, and probably the rest of the members of Heaven's Gate, was actually Cephas. The Dragonborn was actually dating Emma, and none of them had any idea about it. The 2 didn't even interact much together inside the guild headquarters, so this news took everyone by surprise. So after having some girls talk with Iris and the others, Emma finally spilled the beans that Cephas and her had been talking in private using their guild chat. When they asked her when it all started, she said that it happened after she and Cephas completed their mission. It was the mission where they activated a teleportation gate to allow the members of Heaven's Gate to rush to the front lines of the war during the first days of the Abyssal invasion. A relationship between a Dragonborn and a dwarf was something that had never happened in the past. But Cephas and Emma seemed to be serious about their relationship, so everyone gave them their blessings. After being revived by the half-elf, Sid and Scarlet went to talk to him and asked for his blessing because they decided to marry each other. Lux thought that it was only a matter of time before the 2 developed feelings for each other, since they were almost always together. When Laura and Livia heard that their brother planned to marry, both of them became ecstatic. They loved their big brother, so seeing him marry someone made them happy. They were also looking forward to meeting their niece or nephew, whom they planned to spoil rotten. Speaking of relationships that had finally come out in the open, Lux also did something to help the first two people who took good care of him when he arrived in Leaf Village, which almost felt like a lifetime ago. When he resurrected his master, Randolph and Grandma Annie, he gave them new bodies, making them revert to their early 20s. The half-elf even threatened Randolph that if he wasn't going to marry Grandma Annie, he would be marrying her instead. Of course, the blacksmith didn't take his statement lying down, and the two ended up in a fist fight, with Randolph shouting for everyone to hear that he wouldn't give Grandma Annie to the half-elf no matter what. "If you want to marry Annie, you have to go through my dead body first, you unfilial disciple. Don't you know how long I've loved her? Bastard. Just because you're a little more popular with the ladies, you think that you can steal Annie from me? Dream on." Of course, Lux didn't really love Grandma Annie in a romantic way and only loved her as a family member, just like his master Randolph. This was also why he decided to take matters into his own hands and force his stubborn master to make his feelings known. The master-disciple duo only stopped fighting when Grandma Annie slapped both of them silly with her sandals and made them kneel on the ground while reflecting on their actions. The funny thing was that, even though she was nagging at them for creating a ruckus, her face was beet red, which made Sedwin and the rest of the elders of Leaf Town tease her. As a result, they also earned a slap from her sandals, making them flee for their lives. In the end, Randolph manned up and proposed to Annie in front of the entirety of Leaf Town, which made her knock him unconscious for embarrassing her in front of everyone. Lux snuck away during the commotion and decided to just let nature take its course with the two people who helped him during his early days in Elysium. Similar to the two dwarves, Lux also made the former village chief and the other elders younger, giving them a new lease on life. He wanted Leaf Town to prosper, so he wanted Sedwin and the elders to work harder to continue the legacy of the dwarf, Faunus, who built it from scratch. Leaf Village held a very special place in Lux's heart. It was where everything started. Maddie, who was worried that Colette would become one of Lux's lovers due to how close they were, proposed to her. Colette accepted his proposal, making the simp dwarf very happy. Those who had died in the war against the Abyssal Army felt that after getting a second chance at life, they should live it to the fullest. People confessed their feelings to the ones they loved, regardless of whether they would succeed or not. They no longer wanted to regret anything and wanted to live their lives to the fullest. Even Nero, the one who hated Lux in the past, found happiness after becoming engaged to the third princess of the Vahan Empire, which Emperor Andreas ruled. He was one of the people who joined the battle in the Abyss and perished after trying his best to protect his subordinates, who were fighting alongside him. Of course, there were also other surprises that emerged in the months before Lux's wedding ceremony. Lady Faustina and Picoro also decided to tie the knot after the two dragon kingdoms decided to stop all hostilities against each other. They didn't plan on merging into a single kingdom again and decided to have two kingdoms that would keep each other in check to ensure the prosperity of the dragon race. All of these things were only possible because Lux had made it possible. And now, as the new era of peace dawned on both Elysium and Solais, the last preparations for the grandest wedding ceremony in both worlds were reaching their final stages. As all of this was happening, the groom slept soundly in the embrace of his two future wives, who were determined to make him the happiest man in the world for many years to come. Welcome, everyone, to the first ever Elsoisha Olympics, Kazaganaga exclaimed through the microphone, informing the countless people who were watching the event through the projections scattered all over Elysium, Solais, and the world of Hestia. Champions from Elysium and Hestia are now going to compete in the first ever interplanetary Iron Man competition. This event will test their endurance, perseverance, and willpower. A series of running, swimming, and biking events will be held. Hundreds of thousands of people have registered for this epic race, yet only one will emerge victorious once this event is over. Kazaganaga's voice reverberated in the surroundings, making the people in the venue, as well as those who were watching the projections all across the three worlds, cheer at the same time. Along the starting line, countless people were doing stretches in preparation for the first leg of the journey, which was a marathon. There, Cephas noticed a one-eyed demon dog, who was eyeing him with its single beady eye. The Dragonborn and the demon dog stared at each other for a few minutes before raising their hands at the same time to shake hands. Cephas introduced himself. Saglav did the same. The two cannon fodders nodded at the same time in recognition of each other's strength. The other contestants were also eyeing each other as if looking for potential rivals. Now, before this Iron Man event starts, let's all welcome the two sponsors of this event, William von Ainsworth and Lux von Kaiser. Kasaganaga shouted. The sky then suddenly turned dark, making everyone who was watching suddenly feel anxious. A moment later, countless fireworks painted the sky with various colors and designs. But in the middle of these amazing fireworks displays, two golden lightning bolts streaked across the sky and drew a hand with the peace sign, hovering across the sky. After the symbol was created, a draconic skeleton king appeared in front of everyone, with his two arms spread wide. The two golden lightning bolts then landed on the palms of the skeleton king's hands, showing their faces to the two worlds. William von Ainsworth. It's an honor to be here. William introduced himself with a smile. Lux von Kaiser. Is everyone ready to rumble? Lux asked, making the contestants raise their hands and shout their war cries. This event is being held so that the people of Elysium, Solais, and Hestia can form stronger bonds with each other and work together to reach greater heights, William said. It is the first of its kind, and I'm looking forward to seeing who will emerge as the victors of this match. So without further delay, I hereby declare the start of the first ever Elsoisha Olympics. Lux shouted. But before that, let's have a commercial break first. At that exact moment, the goddess Lily appeared on a giant projection in the sky. The lowly goddess was dancing to the sound of the upbeat music playing in the background. On top of her head, the dim sum god, Dim, was making countless dim sum spin in the air that synchronized their moves with Lily's dancing. A moment later, these dim sums flew toward a platter on top of the table where several baby slimes were waiting. These baby slimes then reached out to eat the dim sums, with the camera zooming in to give a close-up view of their reactions. All the 7 baby slimes, who had the colors of the rainbow, had happy and satisfied looks on their faces as they chewed the dim sum in their mouths. Dim sums, Lily said as she appeared behind the baby slimes. Even baby slimes approve. All the baby slimes then looked at the camera and jumped at the same time. Dim sum, coming to a store near you, Lily said with a smile. Dim shouted. The commercial ended. Seeing the happy, satisfied expressions that the baby slimes had shown earlier, everyone who saw the advertisement suddenly felt hungry. Even Lux and William suddenly had the strong urge to eat after seeing that commercial. Suddenly, a flying sea otter descended from the sky, and riding on top of him were Eiko and Fei. The two baby slimes were holding 2 torches in their hands, with the intention of lighting the giant torch, which was actually Eiko's giant bone cauldron that created undead monsters. When the contestants saw this, all of them took a running stance. The moment the torch was lit, the Iron Man race would officially begin. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait that long. When the sea otter was right above the giant cauldron, Eiko and Fei both tossed their torches inside it. Away. Within seconds, flames rose up from the cauldron, and the shouts of countless people reverberated in the surroundings as the contestants all began to sprint. The first part of the Iron Man race was a long-distance marathon that spanned 10,000 miles. The second stage was to swim the seas until they reached the Ford Federation. On the third leg of the journey, they would enter a portal that would take them to Hestia, where they would all ride bicycles. The last leg of the journey was a final sprint to the finish line. This was the Interplanetary Olympics held in both Elysium and Hestia. Solais couldn't take part in hosting this event at this point because the side effects of the recently cleared miasma were still prevalent in the surroundings. It would take at least a decade before the environment healed and returned to its former glory. I'll see you at the finish line, Saglav, Cephas said in a confident tone. Yes, you'll see me holding the gold trophy for finishing first, Saglav replied. Haha, nice joke. Let's see who will be laughing later. As the two cannon fodders ran side by side, The other contestants ran past them. Both of them only had one thought in their minds as they looked at the fools who were sprinting at full speed from the get-go. Amateurs. The two cannon fodders looked at their other competitors in disdain. Both of them were properly pacing themselves to save their strength to actually complete the long event. This was a very demanding event that would push them to the very limits. Since that was the case, pacing was the key to winning. Kazaganaga was busy commentating. While the people cheered for the participants they were rooting on to win. Go! Way! Dim Dim. The three troublemakers were currently riding the sea otter, Lucky, who was now big enough to carry all three of them at the same time. They were flying above the competitors who were running on the ground, but none of the contestants paid the three of them heed. That was their mistake. Eiko, Fei Fei, and Dim Dim were there for a purpose, and that was to make the event harder than it already was. Boom Boom Bakugan. Dewey. Dim Dim. The three troublemakers started to throw blast bombs from the sky, hitting countless people on the ground. The sound of curses and pained shouts spread in the surroundings. But instead of intimidating the three troublemakers, those only made them even more excited, and they began throwing blast bombs like there was no tomorrow. Those on the ground knew that this event wouldn't be easy because they had already been told that they would face obstacles along the way. They just didn't expect that they would be bombed in the starting phase of the journey, making some of the competitors curse the organizer of the event in their hearts. Hirswith, who was seated beside Kazaganaga, was smiling from ear to ear. She was one of the organizers of the event, and the three troublemakers making things difficult for everyone was one of her suggestions, which the gaming committee readily approved. Only one would emerge victorious. Only one would gain fame and glory. This was the start of the El Soisha Olympics. The first leg of the competition had just begun, but many had already fallen to the bombardment of the three troublemakers in the sky. Even so, those who were powerful enough had managed to protect themselves by evading and deflecting the bombs that were raining down on them from above. In fact, some of them even used this opportunity to eliminate their competitors by deflecting the bombs and sending it towards other people. Although the start of the competition was chaotic, the cheers of the people watching the event was at an all-time high. Taking the lead of the marathon is none other than Mr. 80 Dash, Kazaganaga said as he commented on the event in real time. He is followed closely by Mr. Reebok and Mr. Nike. However, the others are not far behind. Everyone was forbidden from using their abilities, and were even wearing artifacts that suppressed them. They could only rely on their strength, endurance, stamina, and willpower, which was something that they didn't lack. Truth be told, none of them were worried about the race. What they were worried about were the hurdles that would stop them from reaching the finish line. The bombardment finally stopped, Soglav commented. Is it just me, or are those slimes purposely not targeting you? It's just your imagination, Cephas replied. Cephas was indeed not targeted even once during the bombardment of blast bombs from above, and the reason for this was simple. He was someone who had taken good care of the baby slimes in their guild headquarters, and even protected them during the war. Because of this, Eiko, Fei Fei, and Dim Dim didn't target him even once when they started throwing bombs at everyone. A few hours passed, and the runners finally arrived at the next leg of their journey. They needed to swim towards the Ford Federation, which was located on the other side of the sea. Fortunately, there were several floating slimes that held flags, which informed everyone the general direction on where they needed to go. Those that had taken the lead in the marathon earlier found themselves being overtaken by people who specialized in swimming. Some of the participants lived near coastal towns or on islands, with others even being demi-humans that had aquatic origins. Everyone thought that they would be bombarded by bombs while they were swimming in the water, so they made sure to spread themselves accordingly so that they could evade at a moment's notice. Damn, why isn't there a flying event in this contest? Cephas complained as he swam in the water. Swimming wasn't really his strong point, but he practiced a lot just to join the tournament. Several spectators who could fly in the sky followed the contestants, including Kazaganaga, who was riding on top of a wyvern. When the contestants were halfway in their journey, they saw several pirate ships sailing in the waters. They were the members of Eiko's Boom Boom pirate crew, and their role was to become the obstacle that would hinder the contestants from reaching their destination. Aim! Avery ordered, and all the cannons of the pirate ships aimed at the people that were swimming in their direction. Fire! All the cannons roared to life, but instead of explosives, the cannonballs were made of a silvery liquid that would encapsulate those it hit with an air bubble, trapping them in place. Of course, those that were trapped inside the bubble could still break free, but it would take them considerable time and effort to do so. Unlike the first hurdle, this time, Cephas wasn't spared from the bombardment that was raining down on them. However, none of the cannonballs hit him because he was able to dodge them in time. An hour later, he managed to safely pass the pirate ships, who were only firing their cannons at the people that were in front of them. Those who managed to pass through their defensive line were no longer targeted, making them sigh in relief. Due to the bombardment, more than half of the participants were forced to retire because they were unable to break free from the air bubbles that trapped them in place. Several hours later, the tired contestants finally reached the Ford Federation. All of them were then given bicycles to ride, so that they could continue the third phase of their journey. The sun was setting in the horizon, but that was not a problem. Their goal for the third part of the race was to travel across the Bifrost Bridge, which would take them to the world of Hestia, where the final phase of the competition was waiting for them. Most of the contestants had reached their limit by this point, even if they had superhuman strength. The bike ride towards Hestia would take them at least 10 hours at the minimum, if they were traveling at least 40 kilometers per hour. But since most of the participants were already tired, the majority of them were only cycling between 15 to 20 kilometers per hour. Some were even moving at 5 to 10 kilometers per hour and resting their heads on the steering bar of their bikes to recover their strength. Cephas and Soglav were among the people who were trying to recover their strength for the final push. This continued for several hours until they finally saw the world of Hestia in the distance. Similar to Elysium, Hestia was a beautiful blue planet. Although the marks of the previous war could still be seen on its surface, the majority of people had managed to adapt to the changes of their environment and live relatively peaceful lives. Since the final descent to Hestia was downhill, all the contestants accelerated, even if they weren't doing anything special. Most of them had recovered a bit of their strength during the journey and were now preparing for the final phase of the race, which was a 10-mile sprint. The reason why everyone was adamant on winning the race was because of the prize that Lux and William promised to the victor. Whoever won the first ever Elsoisha Olympics would be granted a wish. As long as the two half-elves were able to grant it, they would grant it without fail. Of course, there were certain restrictions to the wishes. Wishes that would harm anyone in whatever way were not allowed. Wishes that might cause instability in the world were not allowed either. But, as long as the wish wouldn't affect the two worlds on a grand scale, the two half-elves would grant it. This was why many had trained so hard for this event, because they wanted one of their wishes to be granted. "See you at the finish line," Soglav roared as he dropped his bicycle on the ground and made a mad sprint. "That's my line, you punk." Cephas roared as well as he, too, ran with everything he had. The other contestants were also running at their fastest speeds in order to reach the finish line. A 10-mile sprint was not a big deal to these powerful individuals who had surpassed the limits of mortals. It wouldn't even take them an hour to reach their destination. "It's there. I can see it." Cephas gritted his teeth when he saw the flags in the distance, where the finish line was located. Just a little more. Soglav and the others were thinking about the same thing, so all of them pushed themselves to the limit one last time. Suddenly, Kazaganaga's voice spread in the surroundings. "What's that up in the sky?" Kazaganaga exclaimed when he saw something that wasn't part of the event. High above the clouds, and perched on top of the Bifrost Bridge, were Eiko, Fei, and Dim Dim. Behind them, countless baby slimes of different colors all looked down on the contestants below with determined looks on their faces. Eiko, who was the leader of the baby slimes, took a deep breath before shouting with all of her might. "I'm rolling." The moment she said those words, the fairy princess rolled down on the rainbow bridge that extended towards the ground. Fei and Dim Dim were quick to follow her example, as they, too, rolled down the rainbow bridge for the last leg of the race. "Daway." Dim Dim. The countless baby slimes also followed their leader as they, too, rolled down, creating a rainbow-colored avalanche that made the people on the ground panic. rolling, 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 rolling. Aya. Kazaganaga and the rest of the spectators could only gasp in shock at the unexpected turn of events. The three troublemakers had gathered all the baby slimes in Elysium in order to join the last part of the race. With Eiko leading the charge, all the bodies of the baby slimes glowed, encasing them in a protective coating, which would prevent them from getting squished. *T. Arg. Damn. F***CK. All sorts of curses escaped the contestants' lips as they were mowed down by the slime army, who were all giggling like mad as they rolled over them. Damn, I wish I was there. Kazaganaga, who was commentating the event, could only watch with envy as the countless baby slimes rolled towards the finish line, leaving all the contestants lying on the ground. We won. Eiko jumped in place happily. Way. Dim. Won. Aya. The happy baby slimes all jumped in place after they had successfully hijacked the event. However, Lux and William descended from the sky and told the three troublemakers that they were disqualified from winning because they didn't participate in the event properly. In the end, the surviving contestants were allowed to rest for 2 hours before restarting the final sprint of the race. The final winner of the Iron Man competition was a tie between Cephas and Soglav, so both of them were allowed one wish each. As for what they wished for, no one really knew. However, one thing was clear. Both of their wishes were granted, which also marked the end of the first ever Iron Man race, which would be held again in another 10 years. This event would pave the way for the next generation of heroes who would play a vital role in the unexpected event that would shake the entire multiverse in the future. Today was a special event. It was the day when Lux von Kaiser would marry his lovers. The wedding would be held on the floating island, which was docked just outside of the Finn Kingdom's capital city. The important people from all over Elysium and Solais made their way to the venue with the intention of being part of the grandest wedding in the history of the world. The wedding would be held in front of the headquarters of Heaven's Gate, which was now filled to the brim with guests. Those who were unable to get some good seats watched the event on the decks of their flying ships from the sky. The groom restlessly stood at the makeshift altar with his father and mother, feeling excited and anxious at the same time. "Are you nervous?" Adeline asked as she used her hand to smooth the non-existent creases in Lux's black suit. "Yes, mother," Lux replied. "Huh. Even though you're already this powerful, you still get cold feet?" Vincent, Lux's biological father, asked. "But I have to admit that all of your wives are very beautiful. I wonder, should I also marry other Womark?" "It was just a joke, Adeline. Just a joke." The beautiful elf didn't hesitate to pinch Vincent's waist, making the latter cry out in pain. "Can you repeat what you just said?" Adeline asked. "I didn't hear you properly the first time." "Wife, I love only you," Vincent replied in an anxious tone. "This is why I haven't married anyone else ever since the two of us got together." Then what was that about you planning to marry more women?" "Marry what? How can I possibly do that when I already have the best woman in the world?" "Such nonsense." Lux couldn't help but laugh internally as he looked at his henpecked father, who was at the mercy of his mother. Adeline was about to say more, but she stopped herself when she noticed a pair of cute little girls walking down the carpeted floor while throwing flower petals. One of them had long blue hair and blue eyes, while the other had long blonde hair and gold eyes. They were wearing blue and yellow dresses, highlighting the color of their hair and eyes. These two adorable girls were none other than Eiko and Fei Fei. Similar to Eiko, Fei Fei had gained the ability to transform into a human. The two of them had been chosen to be the flower girls for the wedding, and the two of them had wide smiles on their faces as they threw flowers. Behind them, the sea otter, Lucky, hovered a meter above the ground. Mounted on his back was none other than the dim sum god, Dim, who was also throwing flower petals everywhere. Seeing this scene, Adeline pulled her husband's hand as they walked back to the front seats, where they belonged. The brides had arrived, and Lux's gaze softened as he looked at them walking down the aisle. Iris was being escorted by her father, Alexander. Kai was being escorted by her grandpa, Maximilian. Valerie by her father, King Azza. Aurelia by her father, Kyoza. Aina and Luna were escorted by Victor. Since Luna no longer had any living family members aside from Aina, King Victor decided to escort her to the altar, having considered her as part of his family. Ali and Ari, on the other hand, were escorted by their father, Tyrion, whom Lux had only met thrice since the war had ended. Aurora was escorted by her father, King Septimius, while Queen Rhiannon was escorted by Antero in his human form. With his in-laws being made up of the most powerful individuals in both Elysium and Solais, it was no exaggeration to say that Lux was the most influential person in both worlds. 1 groom and 10 brides. Everyone looked at them with smiles on their faces, including Princess Anastasia and Henrietta, who both didn't know that they would be marrying him as well a year from now. Lux stood at the center, with his wives standing behind his back. When everyone had gathered, an old man wearing an eye patch walked towards the altar holding a book in his hand. He then glanced at the people and raised his hand, gesturing for everyone to remain silent. "We are gathered here today to join this young man and these beautiful ladies in holy matrimony," James said with a smile. "With love and commitment, they have decided to live their lives together as husband and wives. But before I continue, if anyone objects to the marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." After James said these words, Asmodeus stood up and turned around to face the guests, who had come to witness his master's wedding. "If any of you have a death wish, speak now or forever hold your tongue," Asmodeus stated. Diablo, Ishtar, Pazuzu, and the rest of Lux's named creatures all stood up, ready to deal with the troublemakers who would dare to get in the way of their master's happiness. Seeing that no one was saying anything, James smiled and faced the groom and his brides. "Today, as you join yourselves in marriage, there is a vast and unknown future stretching out before you," James said softly. "The possibilities and potentials of your married life are great, and now falls upon your shoulders the task of choosing your values and making your dreams real. Through your commitment to each other, may you grow and nurture a love that makes all of you better people. A love that continues to give you great joy, and also a passion for living that provides you with energy and patience to face the responsibilities of life. May you always need one another, not to fill an emptiness, but to help each other know your fullness. May you want one another, but not out of lack. May you embrace one another, but not encircle one another. May you succeed in all important ways with each other, and not fail in the little graces. May you have happiness, and may you find it in making one another happy. May you have love, and may you find it in loving one another." James then glanced at the 2 little girls and nodded their head in their direction. Aiko and Fei Fei walked toward the altar, holding the box that contained the wedding rings. Lux took a ring from the box and gently placed it on Iris' ring finger. He did the same for his other brides until all of them were wearing their wedding rings. "I pledge today to have all the patience and passion that love demands. In laughter and in silence, I'll forever be by your sides," Lux said. "All of your love gives me hope. Your smiles give me joy. Each of you makes me a better man. Forever with all of you will simply not be enough, but from this day forward, I vow to make the most of every moment." Kai and the others also said their vows, making Lux feel his heart melt inside his chest. The last one to say her vow was Iris, who gently slid Lux's wedding ring on his ring finger. "On behalf of everyone, we pledge to honor you, love you, and cherish you as our husband today and every day," Iris said. "We love you with all of our hearts with a passion that can't be expressed in words, only in kisses, glances, and years of adventures by your side. Today, we are the happiest women in the world, and we are certain that our happiness has only just begun." After saying their vows, James raised his hands, and a faint radiant light descended from the sky, bathing the brides and groom with the blessings of the heavens. "With the power vested on me, I hereby pronounce you husband and wives. You may now kiss your brides." A resounding cheer and applause reverberated in the arena as Lux kissed his brides one by one. Lux and his brides then walked down the aisle together, receiving the blessings of everyone. A few minutes later, Iris threw her bouquet of flowers, which was a wedding tradition on Earth that Lux wished to adopt in Elysium and Solais. Surprisingly, the one who caught the bouquet was none other than Lux's grandmaster, Hirswith, making her smile with amusement. Lux had said that whoever caught the bouquet that was thrown by the bride would superstitiously be the next one to get married. Although the half-elf didn't know if Hirswith would indeed marry someone in the future, he wished with all of his heart that his grandmaster would find happiness in her life. That night, Lux spent his honeymoon with his wives in one of the most beautiful places in the Finn kingdom, savoring the overflowing love and passion that all of them had for him. 2 years had passed since Lux had married his lovers. In the dimly lit room, a young lady with long purple hair wrapped her arms around Lux's neck, her seductive voice spilling out of her sensual lips. Lux's hands were supporting her buttocks as he moved her body up and down, pushing her to the peak of pleasure. A few minutes later, Henrietta's body shuddered as something hot gushed inside her womb, making her feel complete. Her beautiful and exhausted body lost its strength, but there was no need to worry. Her man had his arms wrapped around her, securing her in place as her body shuddered from time to time due to the intensity of his release. When everything was over, Lux patted her head and kissed her cheeks. Henrietta felt tired, but also fulfilled as her husband whispered words of love in her ears. Lying beside them was Princess Anastasia, whose eyes slowly opened. She had just regained her consciousness after Lux had made love to her countless times to the point that she passed out. The dwarf princess slowly propped herself up and looked down at her lower half, which was still leaking a bit of Lux's essence and staining the bedsheets. A few red stains could be seen on the white sheets, proving that she had given her chastity to the person she loved. She and Henrietta had married Lux just a few hours ago, and now they were consummating their marriage. Seeing that Princess Anastasia was awake, Lux reached out to gently pat her head, making her look in his direction. "Does it still hurt?" Lux asked in a gentle tone. "No," Princess Anastasia replied before shifting her gaze to Henrietta, who seemed to have temporarily lost consciousness as well. "Let's go wash up," Lux said as he carefully carried Henrietta in his arms like a princess. The dwarf princess nodded and followed him to the washroom, where the half-elf washed both of his wives thoroughly. Since this was their first night, he didn't want to push the two of them too hard. He then cleaned the bed and changed the bed sheets so that both of them could sleep more comfortably. The three of them then slept together, holding on to each other, for when morning came, their new lives would start anew. 2 more days passed before Lux, Henrietta, and Princess Anastasia returned to the floating island of Edea, where the rest of Lux's wives were currently at. When they arrived, they saw Aiko carrying a baby girl in her arms, gently rocking her to sleep. Watching this scene made Lux smile because it made him remember some fond memories. A few years back, Aiko was still a baby, and she was the one being carried. Now, the little girl was taking care of her little sisters, making sure that all of them were safe from harm. Not far from Aiko, Valerie's daughter, Ria, was sleeping peacefully beside several baby slimes, who were also sleeping beside her. Valerie's Draco slime, Kay, was also there to keep watch on the little girl, whom he was treating as his own little sister. Iris and Valerie, who were both seated on the couch and were also watching over their kids, glanced at Lux with a smile. "Welcome back, Lux," Iris said. "Did the three of you enjoy your honeymoon?" "I did," Lux replied. "I don't know about these two, though." Lux grinned as he walked hand in hand with Henrietta and Princess Anastasia. The half-elf's 2 brides were blushing so hard because they, too, enjoyed their honeymoon. In fact, they enjoyed it very much. If not for the fact that Lux didn't want the 2 of them to get pregnant right away, he would have definitely made sure that both of them would be carrying his child before they returned to their guild headquarters. Princess Anastasia and Henrietta agreed to wait 2 more years before the 2 of them conceived his child. The half-elf would still need to nurture their bodies with his essence so that they would be able to bear the burden of giving birth to his children, who would be blessed with the power of his divinity. "Where are the rest?" Lux asked after kissing Iris and Valerie's cheeks. "Sleeping," Valerie replied. "We had a long discussion that lasted until dawn." "Long discussion?" Lux arched an eyebrow. "About what?" "Secret," Iris answered before Valerie could spill the beans. They couldn't possibly tell Lux that they were creating a schedule that would allow each of them to monopolize him for a few days. According to the agreement, Iris and Kai would be with Lux on Monday nights. On Tuesdays, it would be Valerie and Aurelia. On Wednesdays, Ali and Ari would be accompanying him. Thursdays' nights were reserved for Aina and Luna. Fridays would be Aurora's and Queen Rhiannon's turn. Last, but not the least, Saturdays were for Princess Anastasia and Henrietta, who had just married Lux. As for Sundays, they would all sleep together. Lux's room already had a bed that was massive enough to easily fit 30 people, so all of them sleeping together wasn't a problem. Suddenly, the door of the room opened, and the succubus queen entered with her nearly 3-year-old daughter, Diameter. The little girl immediately ran toward Lux the moment she saw him, calling out, "Papa!" which made the half-elf pick her up and shower her with kisses. Queen Rhiannon walked towards her husband and daughter and gave the two of them a kiss on the cheeks. "Dia missed you terribly," Queen Rhiannon stated. "Won't you be a dear and accompany her for a while?" "Of course," Lux replied before looking at his adorable daughter. "Where do you want to go, Dia?" "Godfather," Dia answered in a heartbeat. "You really like visiting your godfather, huh?" "Okay, let's go visit him," Lux agreed and left the guild headquarters with his daughter. Lux would often take her to Jap's grave and tell her stories about her godfather, who was no longer with them. Not being able to revive Gap was one of Lux's greatest heartaches. Even if he had the power to revive the dead, what good would it be if he didn't have Jap's soul? As the half-elf made his way up the highest peak of the mountain of Edia, he saw two people, whom he hadn't seen in a while, waiting for his arrival. "Ariel, Max," Lux greeted. "It has been a while." The god of games and the god of gamblers both nodded their heads at the same time. "Indeed it has," Ariel replied. "The two of us have been sleeping in order to recover our strength, and we only woke up a few days ago." Max lightly patted Dia's head before shifting his gaze to the half-elf, whom he had chosen as the candidate for their Heaven's Gate project. Lux had gone above and beyond his expectations, making him feel very proud that he made the right decision in choosing him. "Ariel, and I want to thank you for everything that you have done for both Elysium and Solais," Max said. "Not only did you save Solais, but you have also opened a new era of peace." The god of games nodded as he approached the half-elf, who had refused to ascend to godhood. If it had been anyone else, they wouldn't have hesitated to take the opportunity of a lifetime. "We can't stay long, but know that we will always watch your happiness from afar," Ariel stated. "Your happiness is our happiness, and we sincerely hope that you can be happy for a very long time." Max nodded as his and Ariel's bodies started to glow faintly. "The gates of heaven will always be open for you, Lux," Max said. "Come visit us when you have time. I'm sure that the Temple of the 10,000 Gods will be happy to have you join our ranks." Seeing that the two gods were about to disappear, Dia waved her hands at them. "Bye-bye." Ariel and Max both smiled and waved at Lux's first daughter. "Bye-bye, Diameter. See you soon, little one." After saying those words, the two gods, who had changed Lux's lives for the better, returned to the celestial realm, where they would observe the lives of mortals and see what this new era of peace would show them. Lux looked up at the sky for a few more seconds before continuing his trek up the mountains. When he reached his destination, he saw someone standing in front of his master's tomb. The first thing he noticed was the person's long ears, which resembled that of an elf. However, unlike most elves, this person had long white hair that reached down to his waist, which was tied up by a black hairpin. "Excuse me, are you perhaps lost?" Lux asked as he walked toward the elf while carrying his daughter in his arms. Hearing his voice, the white-haired man slowly turned around and gave Lux a faint smile. The half-elf's body stiffened when he saw the person in front of him. Although he was now an elf, it was impossible for the half-elf to not recognize the person who had played an important part in his life. Lux bit his lip as he tried his best to rein in the emotions that were rising up his chest. However, he wasn't able to stop the tears from streaming down his face, causing Dia to look at him with worry. "Papa?" Dia asked as she wiped the tears on Lux's face with her small hands. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "I'm not hurt," Lux replied as he took a step forward in order to reach the person who was smiling at him. Although he was crying, the tears he had were not of sadness or anger. They were tears of joy after seeing the one person whom he wanted to meet the most in his life. When he was only a meter away from the elf, Lux smiled through his tears and wondered if he was dreaming or not. "Have you been well?" the elf asked with a smile on his face. "Yes, master," Lux replied. "I'm doing well." The smile on JP's face widened as he patted the half-elf's shoulder, making the latter cry harder to the point of tears blurring his vision. The god of games and the god of gamblers had worked tirelessly with Antero in order to revive JP's soul. The three of them had somewhat succeeded, but it was not enough. Because of this, they took JP's extremely weak soul to the world tree and used one of its seeds as a vessel to nourish the halfling soul, allowing him to be reborn as an elf. It took 2 full years before the seed they planted bore fruit, and only a handful of people knew about it. The first one was Antero, whom Ariel and Max had approached. The second was none other than Hearswith, who had safeguarded the seed that housed AP's soul while it was being nurtured. When they were certain that GAP's soul was finally stable, Ariel and Max returned to the heavens to take a nap. Lux had done many things for them, so they racked their brains over what they could do in order to give him the best reward possible. "Papa, is he Godfather?" Dia, who seemed to have understood the elf's relationship with her papa, asked. "Yes, Dia," Lux answered. "He is your godfather." Godfather, Dia cooed as she reached out her hands towards the elf, who was more than happy to hold his godchild for the first time. Suddenly, Lux felt a presence behind him, which made him hastily wipe the tears on his face. He didn't want this person to see him in such a state because he was sure that she would tease him whenever an opportunity would arise. When he was certain that he now looked somewhat presentable, the half-elf turned around and saw his grandmaster, Hearswith, setting up a table and 3 chairs. She then placed several wine bottles and snacks on top of the table before giving her grand disciple a mischievous wink. "I brought wine and snacks," Hearswith said. "The 3 of us have a lot of catching up to do, so we'll be drinking all day and all night." Lux, who had stopped drinking wine ever since the aphrodisiac incident, suddenly found himself in the mood for a good drink. With his grandmaster and master by his side, he was certain that his days would be happy and bright. Randolph paced back and forth, incredibly feeling anxious. He had waited for this day to arrive all his life. When he woke up a few hours ago, he thought that he was just dreaming. However, after confirming that this was all real, he wasn't able to calm down despite doing his best to not overthink things. What if she changed her mind? Randolph thought as he continued to pace back and forth. What will I do then? Seeing him pacing back and forth, the mayor of Leaf Town, Sedwin, who was also Randolph's and Annie's close friend, sighed loudly. "Get a grip, man," Sedwin stated. "If you are getting cold feet, I don't mind swapping places with you today." F***ck off, Sedwin. Randolph broke out of his worry and glared at his friend. "I know you've been simping for Annie for the past century. You better stay away or I'll clobber you." "So what if I've been simping for her for the past century?" Sedwin snapped. "She doesn't deserve a stupid guy like you. Even now, I don't see what she saw in you that I didn't have. Oh, right. Maybe she has a soft spot for idiots. The kind of hopeless fools who can't even tie their shoes properly. You simp, get out of here. Bastard, stop calling me simp. You want to fight? Who's afraid of who? Let's go." Randolph and Sedwin both didn't hold back and started to wrestle with each other. The dwarves who were watching from the side all raised their hands and cheered. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Complete pandemonium ensued as the groom and his best man duked it out in front of countless people. "Aren't you going to stop them?" GAP asked Lux, who was standing beside him as his own best man. "Nah," Lux replied. "It's better this way." Cephas, who was also wearing a suit, wasn't paying attention to anyone because, just like Randolph, he was also feeling very anxious. Even before the battle against Daniel, he never felt this anxious in his life. But now, he felt as if he wanted to run away, never to be seen or heard from again. If not for the fact that Gerhardt, who was also wearing a suit and standing beside him, the Dragonborn would have done so already. He didn't want the green-haired half-elf to have something to use against him in the future, so he simply stared at the ground, while waiting for this event to finally end. Sid stood as straight as a sword, unmoved by what was happening around him. But, deep inside, he had the same feelings as Randolph and Cephas, who were very anxious about tying the knot with the people whom they would spend the rest of their life with. Alexander, who was also standing in front of the altar, was the most composed among the group. For him, something like this wasn't a big deal. But he had to admit that seeing the young men around him feeling anxious made him smile in his heart. Suddenly, the orchestra that Lux hired started to play their instruments in the background. The half-elf had invited a very popular singer from Earth to sing the song Perfect for the wedding, and he had to admit, this made the walk down the aisle for the brides more memorable. Aiko, Fei, Laura, and Livia were the four flower girls and were at the very front, scattering flower petals on the aisle. Right behind them, Hearswith walked in her white wedding dress. AP, who saw his bride-to-be, couldn't help but smile because he had loved Hearswith ever since he had laid his eyes on her. The time she had saved him when he was still a boy was the same day he had fallen in love with her. Even after so many years had passed, his feelings stayed the same. This was why he had poured everything he had, including his soul, into his revenge after her death. This was the only thing he could do for the woman he loved and cherished for a very long time. Right behind Hearswith was Alicia. After many ups and downs, her love had finally borne fruit. Perhaps having herself and Alexander die in Daniel's hands was a good thing. It allowed them to live their lives to the fullest without any regrets, allowing them to take that last step to walk this life together hand in hand. Behind Alicia was Emma. No one, not even Lux, expected her to have a romantic relationship with Cephas. All the members of Heaven's Gate confronted her, ready to beat the crap out of the Dragonborn if he used any underhanded tricks to force Emma to have a relationship with him. But, to their surprise, Emma defended Cephas and said that no one forced her to become his lover, saying that the two of them simply found each other's company very worthwhile, and, shortly thereafter, their feelings for each other grew naturally. Following Emma were General Garrett's two daughters, Alexa and Emily. Both of them would be marrying Gerhardt, who had managed to get their father's approval after the two fought each other. Lux was there when this happened, watching the two people duke it out with each other without holding back. The battle was intense, but in the end, Gerhardt managed to win by a close margin, gaining Garrett's acknowledgement. Behind the two sisters was Scarlet. She was the assassin who was tasked to assassinate Lux alongside Sid many years ago. After being revived by Blackfire when the war was over, she and Sid decided to take their relationship more seriously. This was why when they heard that Randolph and Annie were getting married, they asked Lux if they could also marry each other. The half-elf was more than happy to help the two and thought that this was the perfect opportunity to kill 6 birds with one stone. He then talked to his two masters, Gap and Randolph, his father, Alexander, as well as Cephas that they should hold a joint wedding and make it a grand event. It took him a lot of effort to convince the men to do it, but once one of them agreed, the rest followed. The half-elf couldn't help but smile as he looked at the last bride who was walking down the aisle. Grandma Annie was no longer a grandma, but a young, beautiful lady who was given a second chance at life. Lux had restored her youth alongside Randolph and the elders of Leaf Town. Now that there were no longer any barriers to stop them from finally tying the knot, the men at the altar all held the hands of their brides. James presided over the wedding, just like he did for Lux's wedding. Unlike the half-elf's wedding, though, which was truly a grand event, the scale of today's wedding was smaller. Even so, it was still just as grand, with Lux taking care of the preparations. He didn't skimp on the budget and invited professionals from Earth to make the wedding memorable. When the marriage ceremony finished, he felt truly fulfilled because, just like him, the people who were part of his life were also going to start their lives with their special someone. A few hours later, the half-elf sparingly drank a glass of wine as he chatted with another red-headed half-elf who was sharing the table with him. "Did you get the invitation?" William asked as he looked at the young man in front of him. "I did," Lux replied. "Did you get one as well?" "MMM." William nodded before taking out the letter that was sent to him a day ago. "The Sentinels," Lux said as he took out his own letter. "And we need to deal with enemies who are considered planetary-level threats?" "MMM." William hummed. "At least, that is what is written in the letter." The letters were signed, but the name of the sender remained anonymous. The only thing that they did know was that, if they agreed to be part of the Sentinels, they would receive another letter with more details written in it. Lastly, the letter was authentic because the gods in the Temple of the 10,000 Gods knew who the sender of the letter was. Lux and William already knew that the gods themselves could not make a move, and only those who didn't step into the realm of godhood, like the two half-elves, were capable of dealing with threats, as well as individuals who had the power to destroy entire planets. "So are you going to join?" William asked. "Why not?" Lux shrugged. "How about you?" "I'm in as well," William answered. As soon as the two of them both agreed to join the Sentinels, an orb of light suddenly appeared in front of the two half-elves. "Thank you for accepting the invitation to be part of the Sentinels." A voice that was impossible to tell whether it came from a boy or a girl spoke. "Before I tell you the details of the organization, do you have any questions to ask?" Lux and William glanced at each other before the Necromancer of Heaven asked a question. "Are there any other people that you have invited aside from us?" Lux inquired. "I plan to invite 2 more people," the voice that was coming from the orb of light replied. "But they still haven't finished their own battles. The stories of their epics are still not complete. Only when they have overcome their own battles would they be allowed to join our ranks." "And who are these 2 people?" William asked. He was very curious about the identity of the 2 other individuals who could potentially join them in the future. "Are you fine with just their names and faces?" the voice asked. "Yes," William replied. A moment later, the orb of light shot out 2 projections, showing 2 young men. The 2 half-elves were familiar with one of them, which made them react differently. Lux had nothing but approval after seeing 13's face on the projection because he approved of him joining their ranks. Even though he was weaker than them, he believed that having the young man around would be a very fun experience. William, on the other hand, looked like he had eaten a fly. For him, 13 was an eyesore because one of his daughters was seriously pursuing the standoffish young man, whom William wanted to pinch to death. After looking at 13, their gaze shifted to the handsome young man with long blue hair, who was currently fighting against a giant. The 2 half-elves were very curious about who he was because they hadn't met this person even once. "If these 2 people don't perish and are able to complete their legendary saga, then they too will be joining the ranks of the Sentinels," the voice declared. "Their names are Zion Leventis and Ethan Gremory." After hearing their names, the Necromancer of Heaven finished drinking his wine before standing up with a smile on his face. "Done already?" William asked. "Yes," Lux replied as he gazed at the young man, with short black hair and green eyes, who was fighting a hard battle. "I plan to repay the favor to someone." Without even waiting for a reply, Lux disappeared from where he stood and reappeared near the Bifrost Bridge. His story might have ended, but with it, a new one was about to begin. Lux raised his hand and grinned fearlessly towards the void. "Open, Heaven's Gate."
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.